I heard this woman screaming, "She's dead. She's been murdered." I said, "What? Who is this? What are you talking about?"
She was tied with rope and some type of duct tape.
They found her in the water. I said,
Was it possible to take that hair, send it off, get standards from his dog, and be able to match the dog as far as did the hair come from that particular dog or at least from that breed? Can we match that? Is it possible? And we'd never done it.
On the summer morning of July 24, 2000, in a quiet suburban area of Florida, a retired Brevard County Circuit Court judge began his day as usual, walking around his property, breathing in the fresh air and checking on his small boat moored at the lagoon behind his house. But a strange, foul odor interrupted his peaceful routine. At first, he thought it might be the smell of a dead animal or something that had decomposed, perhaps a manatee, a common sight in the marshy and saltwater lagoons of Florida. However, the smell became stronger and impossible to ignore, like a warning that something horrific was ahead. The judge leaned in for a closer look, only to be met with a sight that froze him in his tracks: a lifeless body. A woman, to be precise, lying face down in the water. The body was severely decomposed, and parts of it had begun to disintegrate. The victim's face was unrecognizable, obscured by mud and water. "I think I've found a dead body," he immediately called the police, his voice trembling with shock. The dispatcher tried to keep calm and instructed him not to disturb the scene until the authorities arrived. If you are new to our channel, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any future videos. Now, let's dive into this heartbreaking story. When the Brevard County Sheriff's Office arrived, they quickly recognized that this was not a simple accident. It was a horrifying scene. Their first task is to secure the area and retrieve the body intact from the murky depths of the river. The body was found unclothed, face down in the water, with her hands and feet tightly bound with rope. The victim's face was covered with white duct tape, wrapping around her mouth, nose, and eyes, making identification nearly impossible. The investigators also found some small plastic bags floating near the body, which seemed to hold heavy objects to weigh her down in the water. However, for some reason, these bags had failed to keep the weight and had burst open, causing the body to float to the surface after a short period. This wasn't just a random murder but a calculated act, with the intent to erase all traces. The police believed that the killer had meticulously tried to conceal the victim's identity, ensure that every cry, every breath, every trace of her existence was suffocated into silence. The oppressive heat and humidity had accelerated decomposition, complicating the already difficult task of gathering clues. Once the victim was carefully pulled from the water, her remains were swiftly sent to the medical examiner's office. The autopsy process began with a general examination of the body. The victim's body was submerged for less than 72 hours, severely decomposed. The skin had turned a purplish hue, and some parts had disintegrated due to prolonged immersion in water. This not only made identification difficult but also complicated the determination of the exact cause of death. Two equally horrifying scenarios were made. Either she had been strangled or suffocated by the tape that cruelly covered her nose and mouth, or, even more chilling, she was thrown into the water while still alive, left to drown in a final, desperate struggle.
There is this misperception in general that if water is found in the airway, in the lungs, and in the stomach, that means that an individual drowned. But in actuality, water can enter the body in those places passively after death. So it doesn't mean definitively that an individual died from drowning just because they have water in their lungs, they have water in their stomach.
Although there were no gunshot or stab wounds, the duct tape covering the victim's mouth, nose, and eyes suggested that she might have been suffocated to death. There were no signs of a struggle, which could imply that she was either unconscious or completely overpowered before being killed. Due to prolonged immersion in water, the victim's skin had peeled off, but the forensic experts could still collect fingerprints from that layer of skin. They make an incision around the wrist of the individual and pull the entire outer layer of skin off. And it makes like a glove. One of the forensic technicians can slide their hand into that skin and roll the fingerprints for the police. This sample was then compared with the National Fingerprint Database to search for a match. After hours of analysis and comparison, the victim's identity was finally determined. She was Misty April Morse, a 22-year-old woman from Indian Harbor Beach, Florida. Misty was a young woman with bright blue eyes and a friendly, outgoing personality. Her entire life was stolen when Misty was brutally murdered, and her body was discarded into the river. With the victim's identity confirmed, the investigators took a significant step forward in solving the case. However, many questions remained unanswered. Who killed Misty, and why was she murdered so brutally? To answer these questions, the investigators needed to delve deeper into Misty's life and relationships. The police visited Misty's family to inform them of her death and learn more about her life before the disappearance. Linda Morse, Misty's mother, was devastated when she received the tragic news. She immediately called Misty's father, Bob, her ex-husband, who was equally unprepared and almost fell down after knowing the unimaginable loss of their beloved daughter. Misty Morse was the youngest child in her family, and from a young age, she was loved and protected by her parents and siblings. Everyone in the family described Misty as a friendly, kind-hearted person. From a young age, Misty showed a strong desire for exploration. She enjoyed participating in extracurricular activities at school. Misty's friends remembered her as a great friend, always ready to listen, share, and help everyone in need. After graduating from high school, Misty decided to continue her education at a nearby community college. She had thought about becoming a teacher, a profession she believed could help many people and make a difference in others' lives. Though Misty maintained close relationships with her family and friends, her love life was not so smooth. She was always cautious in choosing her partner. None of her romantic relationships lasted long. According to Misty's mother, Linda, on the night of July 20th, Misty returned home after a long day and seemed very excited. She informed that she was going out all night and would be back the next day. Misty then received a short phone call and quickly left the house, promising she would return soon. This was the last time Linda saw her daughter alive. The next day, Linda wasn't too worried when Misty didn't return, as she often stayed over at friends' houses without notifying. However, when Misty didn't return the following day and couldn't be reached by phone, Linda began to worry. Linda tried contacting Misty's friends to see if anyone knew where her daughter was. However, none of her friends knew where Misty had gone or with whom she had been that night. This made Linda uneasy, as Misty always told her mother if she planned to stay somewhere overnight. Her disappearance without leaving any trace was entirely out of character. Linda planned to report her daughter's disappearance to the police the next day, but before she could do so, she received a call from the police informing her of the discovery of a body in the lagoon. As soon as the police described the body's characteristics, Linda realized it could be her daughter. Her worst fear was confirmed when the police identified the body as Misty. Determined to help in any way she could, Linda granted investigators full access to Misty's room, hoping that anything might lead them closer to the truth. While most things in Misty's room appeared normal, one detail immediately caught the attention: Misty's purse, sitting untouched on a chair. This small, but significant, discovery led them to two crucial conclusions. First, Misty hadn't planned to be away for long. Second, she was likely meeting someone she knew well. To confirm their suspicions, detectives pulled Misty's cell phone records. To their surprise, they discovered not one, but two calls made to her phone that night. The first call occurred just before midnight and lasted a few minutes. After a brief interval, a second, much shorter call followed. The detectives believed this second call was the one Misty had received while speaking with her mother. However, they faced a significant challenge. Phone records from 2000 lacked the detailed information available today. They had no data on the caller's location and couldn't trace the number. Despite this setback, the timing and duration of the calls suggested they were likely made by the same person. The crime scene where Misty's body was found was a small lagoon behind a judge's home. The area was not heavily populated, mostly consisting of isolated houses and large properties. This made it difficult to determine who might have entered the area, especially at night. The investigators meticulously examined every detail at the scene. They used modern tools to analyze water, soil, and other objects found near the body. One of the first things they noticed was that there were no signs indicating the body had been dragged or moved from elsewhere. This suggested that Misty might have been killed at a different location and then her body was dumped into the lagoon. Another detail that caught the police's attention was the rope used to bind Misty's hands and feet. It was a nylon-type rope with a unique red and white double diamond stitch pattern. The rope ends were burnt. It was a black rubber cord binding. The investigators also found some small plastic bags floating near Misty's body. They were branded with the label of a local grocery store, which could provide a crucial clue about where the killer might have purchased them. Moreover, the rubber tubing used to fasten the bags was identified as pieces of screen spline, commonly used to secure window screens in place. Detectives then turned their attention to the numerous strips of tape tightly wrapped around the victim's face, hands, and limbs. The white tape, initially mistaken for duct tape.
Usually duct tape is gray or it's in some other colors now, but at that point in time, white duct tape was very rare.
This type of white tape wasn't the common kind found in regular grocery stores, but rather a special type of tape, highly durable and often used in tasks requiring high strength, such as boat repairs or construction work. It wasn't just ordinary stuff, but possibly specialized, often used in maritime activities. This immediately made the police think of the possibility that the killer had connections to the maritime industry or had specialized knowledge in maritime activities. The authorities focused intently on the tape, knowing it could potentially capture vital trace evidence such as fingerprints or DNA. Their hopes were high, but the tape yielded no such evidence, seemingly leading to a dead end. However, in a twist of fate, they discovered a few short black hairs clinging to the tape, a potential breakthrough. The detectives quickly realized these hairs couldn't belong to the victim, whose hair was brown with a reddish tint, leading them to believe the hairs might belong to the perpetrator. After meticulously collecting all evidence from the crime scene, they sent it off for testing, hoping for a breakthrough. Yet, in 2000, the limitations of forensic technology meant they couldn't extract DNA from the hairs. Their optimism began to wane as disappointment set in. As the investigation progressed, detectives began connecting critical dots. Reviewing the evidence photos, their attention once again turned to the rope found with Misty's body. The rope was a specific type commonly used in sailing. The knots tied in the rope and screen spline were done in a very specific way. That was a knot that's consistent with being in the Navy. With this discovery in hand and the knowledge that Misty had been thrown into the water by her killer, detectives arrived at a critical conclusion. The suspect likely had a background in sailing or a nautical connection, and perhaps even military experience. As the police dug deeper into Misty's past relationships, they discovered some unusual details. There was one past romantic relationship that had ended poorly, and the ex-boyfriend seemed to hold a grudge against her. The police decided to summon this person for questioning and learn more about the relationship between him and Misty. Additionally, the police discovered that Misty had received some threatening messages recently. These messages were anonymous and didn't contain specific information, but they made Misty feel anxious and uneasy. She had shared this with a few close friends, but no one knew who might be behind these messages. The police collected Misty's electronic devices, including her mobile phone and computer, for analysis to trace the origin of these threatening messages. They hoped that this would help them identify who had threatened Misty and might be connected to her death. Ted Underwood was one of the first people the police summoned for questioning. Ted had a criminal record with multiple offenses, including theft and assault. He had a history of violence and had once been romantically involved with Misty. However, according to Misty's friends, the relationship between her and Ted had ended amicably, with no signs that Ted intended to harm her.
Did she always pick you up, or did you ever drive over there?
I used my mother's car a few times.
Whose car was in front of your house?
The little blue Civic, that's my sister's car.
Had you guys talked about a future together?
Sort of. Not really nothing too crazy, because she don't know, trying to get married and nothing like that. We were a lot alike, even down to the basic stuff.
Just for the record, you provided us with 2 swabs, okay?
Yes.
One on each side of your mouth,
Yes.
each side of your mouth.
Yes.
And that was done of your own free will?
Yes.
You understand that's for DNA purposes?
Yes.
When questioned by the police, tough guy Ted seemed quite cooperative. He admitted that he had been casually seeing Misty around the time of her death, but stressed that their relationship was nothing serious. Ted also agreed to provide a DNA sample, showing his willingness to cooperate with the investigation. After further investigation, the police found no evidence linking Ted to the crime. He had no knowledge of maritime activities, no access to boats, and no duct tape or rope resembling those used to kill Misty in his possession. Therefore, Ted was removed from the list of suspects. Bobby, on the other hand, also drew the detectives' attention, albeit for a different reason. He was a young man with no criminal record and was known to be kind-hearted. However, Bobby seemed obsessively infatuated with Misty, even after she had rejected him.
How long have you known Misty?
Almost 2 weeks.
And when was the last time you were at a house?
Tuesday. I went and had a couple drinks, and then we ended up coming back out here and watching a movie.
Okay. And you called her?
Yes. Called her cell phone every day from then on out until I heard yesterday.
Every day until when?
Until yesterday. Got off work early and I got a phone call from our friend Randy. He told me what had happened. He told me that they had found her floating in the river.
When questioned by the police, Bobby admitted that he still had feelings for Misty and had tried to contact her on the night she disappeared. He also had Misty's driver's license, one of the items missing from her bedroom. He claimed Misty had handed it to him for safekeeping on their first date, as her outfit didn't have pockets, and she had simply forgotten to retrieve it. Despite this explanation, detectives remained wary and requested to search Bobby's home once more. However, when the police searched Bobby's house, they found no evidence. Although Bobby had access to a boat, there was nothing to suggest he had used it to commit the crime. Moreover, he had no military background, further distancing him from their primary suspect profile. As the police prepared to leave his house, Bobby stopped them, recalling something that could potentially change the course of the investigation. There was another ex-boyfriend who Bobby couldn't remember his name. But Misty had mentioned that her ex was a Navy SEAL. Seizing on this crucial lead, detectives returned to Misty's mother. She immediately identified Misty's ex as Brent Huck and shared key details about their relationship. At 28 years old, Brent had been in a long-term relationship with Misty. Linda described it as deeply painful. She revealed that Brent had often been aggressive toward Misty. Their frequent arguments sometimes escalated to physical violence. Despite that, Linda hadn't initially mentioned Brent because they had broken up years earlier, and she believed they hadn't been in contact since. As investigators dug into Brent's background, they uncovered troubling details. Brent was a charter boat captain living on Merritt Island, near the location where Misty's body was discovered. His proximity to the crime scene, with military background and expertise in boating and specialized duct tape and rope, made him a prime suspect. When the police summoned Brent for questioning, they attempted to put him at ease, creating a false sense of security to encourage him to show his true face. Initially, Brent appeared cooperative, but detectives remained cautious, looking for any signs that could link him to Misty's murder. However, Brent's demeanor raised red flags. He showed no shock at Misty's death. While many other suspects might have reacted strongly, showing fear, panic, or vehement denial, Brent remained unusually calm. He didn't seem afraid or overly tense, but rather was very composed in response to every question from the police. This made the investigators even more cautious, as it might indicate that they were dealing with a perpetrator with a strong psychological disposition, well prepared to handle the investigation. A detective questioned something weird on Brent's knuckles. Brent blamed his dog pulling him while he was on a skateboard and the leash burned his hands. But it was an abrasion, not a burn. He was clearly lying.
Right now, we're kind of at a loss. We're grasping at straws, trying to get any information we can on Misty, and we feel you're probably a pretty good source in all what she does and who she hangs out with and this kind of stuff. You're not in any trouble. You're not under arrest. You're free to leave at any time you want. You're on your own free will, so.
More than one outlet. That's when my first question was both. Like, you know, we just appreciate you coming down and filling in the blanks. Okay, that's what we need, is someone who knows her.
Brent eventually admitted that he and Misty had continued to see each other casually even after their official breakup. Then Brent began to criticize Misty about her lifestyle and characters. While he was caught up in the moment, a crucial slip-up appeared. Brent had called Misty on the night she disappeared, but he insisted that they didn't meet and that the call was merely to discuss rumors that Misty was spreading. She claimed she was pregnant with his child. He was trying to stop those rumors to protect the serious relationship with his current girlfriend. Brent maintained that he wasn't at the scene on the night Misty disappeared and had nothing to do with her death. However, detectives were far from convinced by Brent's story. The autopsy revealed that Misty had not been pregnant at the time of her death, casting serious doubt on Brent's claim that he was confronting her about the rumors. The police believed Brent might have killed Misty to prevent potential complications if she were indeed pregnant. This could explain Misty's excitement to go out that night. She might have believed they were getting back together. Instead, detectives feared that she had stepped into a trap, deceived by Brent's seemingly benign intentions. Brent also provided a detailed account of his schedule on the night Misty disappeared, but no witnesses could corroborate his statement. This further heightened suspicion about him. The police decided to continue investigating Brent's past and his activities in the days leading up to and following Misty's disappearance. As the police began to dig into Brent Huck's past, they discovered that he was not someone with a clean record. Brent had served in the military, specifically in the Navy, where he had learned various skills related to maritime activities and the techniques of using specialized ropes and duct tape. After leaving the military, Brent began working as a captain on a private sailboat at Merritt Island. Brent lived a rather private life, rarely socializing with others outside of work. He was described as a quiet, cold man who sometimes had a bad temper. Some of his neighbors mentioned that they rarely saw Brent interacting with anyone and that he often stayed alone on his boat, with few social relationships. The police then obtained a warrant to search Brent Huck's home for further evidence. And they hit the jackpot. In Brent's kitchen, they found plastic bags from Publix, identical to those used to weigh down Misty's body, manufactured in the same month and year. In Brent's garage, detectives uncovered a piece of screen spline identical to the one used to bind Misty's feet. Sail rope discovered from Brent's house and the waters near his dock was a perfect match to the one found at the crime scene, even tied with the same knot used to bind Misty. The police also found other maritime-related items, including a roll of white duct tape and some nylon fabric, possibly used for boat repairs. While these items weren't direct evidence, they helped paint a clearer picture of a killer with deep maritime knowledge who might have used these skills to carry out the crime. With growing confidence in their case against Brent, detectives quickly compiled all the evidence and presented it to the district attorney's office, seeking justice for Misty. However, what they expected to be a straightforward process took an unexpected turn. The district attorney, viewing the case as far from clear-cut, the evidence all deemed circumstantial. The DA demands more concrete proof. The powerless detectives failed to secure a conviction. Although significant physical evidence was found, they still needed a major breakthrough. Forced to step back, they had no choice but to watch their prime suspect, Brent, continued with his life as if nothing had happened. 2 years later, Misty suddenly went viral as some journalists dug her case up, thanks to the determination of her family and the detectives. Her mother wrote letters to every editor demanding justice and complaining the killer was still running around free, enjoying life. Misty always hated to be wet, yet she was discarded in the cold river. When these stories were spread to QuestGen Forensics in Davis, California, they immediately called the Brevard County Sheriff's Office and offered help. One of the critical details the police discovered at the crime scene was several small hairs stuck to the duct tape used to bind Misty. Initially, these hairs were thought to be human, but upon closer analysis, the investigators were shocked to realize they were from an animal, specifically a dog. The forensic experts conducted a thorough analysis and identified that these hairs belonged to a German Shepherd Rottweiler mix. This raised significant suspicion about Brent, as he also owned a dog of this breed, given to him by Misty during their relationship. The police collected samples of Brent's dog, Chiba hair, and compared them to the samples found at the scene. The results showed a perfect match, directly linking Brent to the crime scene. This was the strong evidence the police needed to charge Brent Huck with murder. Besides the DNA analysis of the dog's hair, the police also conducted other tests on the evidence found at the scene and in Brent's home. One crucial piece of evidence was a charred piece of nylon fabric found near where Misty's body was discovered. This fabric was identified as part of the sail from Brent's boat. This further solidified the evidence that Brent had used his boat to transport Misty's body to the lagoon where it was found. The police also found several fingerprints on the duct tape and rope used to bind Misty. Although these fingerprints were not clear due to water damage and time, some samples could still be used for comparison with Brent's fingerprints. The comparison results showed that some of these fingerprints matched Brent's, further supporting the theory that he was the killer. With the DNA evidence from the dog's hair and the other physical evidence like the duct tape and rope, on October 23, 2002, Brent was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. The police wasted no time in gathering sufficient evidence and presenting it to the prosecutor's office to proceed with legal action. When Brent was arrested, he maintained his stance that he was innocent and had nothing to do with Misty's death. However, the prosecutors had enough evidence to take him to trial and prosecute him for murder. Brent Huck's trial attracted significant attention from the public and the media. This was a serious murder case, and everyone was eager to see justice served for Misty Morse, the young woman who had her life cruelly taken. At the trial, the prosecutors presented strong evidence against Brent. They argued that Brent had killed Misty out of fear that she might be pregnant, which would affect his current relationship. They painted a detailed picture of how Brent lured Misty into meeting for reconciliation but instead killed her and tried to cover up his crime. The prosecutor also presented the physical evidence, including the duct tape, rope, and especially the DNA evidence from the dog's hair, to prove that Brent was the one who committed the crime. They emphasized that this evidence could not be refuted and clearly linked Brent to the crime scene. Another crucial part of the trial was the testimony from witnesses, including Misty's friends and family, as well as people who knew Brent before and after the crime occurred. These testimonies helped provide context for Brent's motive and shed more light on his relationship with Misty. After all the evidence was presented and the testimonies were heard, the jury did not take long to reach a verdict. In May 2003, Brent Huck was found guilty of first-degree murder and kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison for these two charges without the possibility of parole. This sentence brought justice to Misty Morse and her family while sending a strong message that crime will never go unpunished. Although Brent Huck tried to conceal his crime, the truth ultimately came to light, and he had to pay for what he had done. He is currently serving his sentence at Florida Appalachia Correctional Institution. The case of Misty Morse is a clear reminder that justice will always find the truth, no matter how sophisticated and cleverly concealed a crime may be. Although Brent Huck tried to cover up his actions, the truth eventually came out, and Misty received the justice she deserved. This case also serves as a reminder of the importance of thorough investigation, persistence in the search for truth, and the power of DNA technology in solving complex cases. The story of Misty Morse will forever serve as a warning to us about the dangers of unhealthy relationships and the importance of protecting ourselves and those around us from potential harm. Misty's family and friends endured an irreplaceable loss, but they ultimately received the justice they deserved. Found this story helpful and want to stay updated on other cases in the future? Be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss any videos from us. Thank you for watching the entire video. Please leave your thoughts about this case in the comments below. We're looking forward to hearing your opinions.